Hey y'all, Biohack here. Today we had one of the most interesting additions to the game we've ever seen in BDO, in particular with respect to the accessory market and realistically the Pen Deboreka accessory market. And that is addition of the item right here, the Jay's Hammer of Precision. So we've had hammers added to the game in the past, Jay's hammers, and what they typically do is they allow you to enhance a weapon or an armor, and you won't have to use cronstones, and it will essentially act as a cronstone replacement, meaning if you fail the enhancement, the item doesn't downgrade. Jay's Hammer of Precision is a little bit different because it works on accessories, and not only does it prevent the item from being destroyed when you fail, just like cronstones do, but it also cannot downgrade. This makes it even stronger than typical strong cronstones, which have a 40% chance of the level of the accessory being downgraded if the enhancement chance fails. So this is an incredibly good item, and it's also tradable on the market, which no hammers have ever been tradable before. It's relatively easy to get. You need to have been logged in for 200 hours total across your whole family. And given that a lot of people leave their game AFK in the background, you can hit that pretty quickly. And you need to have a character that's level 61 and finish some relatively easy quests. So as you can see, these things have been given out in mass. Tons and tons of people have them, and they are absolutely flooding the market. So what I want to do in this video is talk about some of the math behind these hammers, give you some idea of what they're actually worth in terms of how much money they save you when you're using them on Deboreka accessories. And that's pretty much exclusively what you're going to use these for. It's going for Pen Deborekas. It would be a massive waste to use them for anything else. So we'll look at sort of if you compare it to making a Deboreka with costume crons, if you make it Deboreka with vendor crons, and also looking at what kind of effect this will have on the Pen Deboreka market and whether or not it's possible that we might ever see Pen Deboreka sitting on the market now that this hammer is in the game. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around and we're going to jump into a spreadsheet. But if you're not interested in the spreadsheet part, I will leave a link to, or basically a timestamp to the conclusions where you can just jump to that if you just want to see what the final conclusion is. But without further ado, let's jump into some of the math and see if we can't answer some of these questions for you. All right, so what do we got here? We first need to figure out a few different things. One is how much does it actually cost to make a pen debo normally? And then how much does it cost to make with a hammer so that we can actually compare the difference between the two? So we're going to have to make a few different assumptions. To determine the cost to make a hammer or make a pen debo normally, we need a few different values. We need the value of a tet deboreka. We need the value of a tri deboreka. We need the value of the base debo. We need the fail stack. We're going to use the value of the fail stack and the success rate on that fail stack. We need the number of crons, and we need how much those crons are actually worth. So here I've gone ahead and created a spreadsheet that has all this different stuff in it. I'm going to use the values as they are on NA at the time of this writing. I will put this spreadsheet in the description of this video, so if you'd like to edit it and make your own copy to adjust it for whatever server you're on, feel free to do that. You will need to make your own copy. Just go to File and Make Copy so that you can edit it. If you request to edit this one, I will not reprove it because this is the one that everyone else needs to copy from. You can't edit this one. So I always say that because I get like 10 emails a day from all the different spreadsheets I've made in this game of people asking for permission to edit this thing. So you have to make your own copy. You can't edit this one. Anyway, so what have I decided? Tet Deboreka, we're putting in 85 billion. These values are in million here, so 85,000 is 85 billion. Tri Deboreka is 20 billion 600 million silver. I'm using the base debo of 825. You very likely might want to use a higher value than this because these are not purchasable on the market and you typically have to grind them. So it might be worth putting in up to about 2 billion. I'm just going to leave it as the base debo. All the numbers you're going to see in the spreadsheet or just in this whole analysis are going to be kind of rough numbers. They're going to change based on things like the exact fail stacks you use, how much you value that fail stack, et cetera, et cetera. So, adjust for that as you will, but this is just going to give you a rough idea of what everything is worth. For the hammer, we'll start with 27, but that's not for this part of the equation. I'm going to assume you're using a 280 stack. This is typically what I recommend for most people these days. I know a lot of people like to go to 300 plus. I do not think that is worth it. And you could maybe even go a little bit lower than 280, but that's pretty reasonable. We're going to use that here. I'm going to value that stack at 15 billion silver. If you want to change that, feel free, but 15 billion is a fairly reasonable value for that. 280 stack on a pen accessory has a 14.5% success rate, so that's what we've got right here. You need 11,548 crons to actually do the enhancement, and actually we're going to start with vendor crons, assuming that you're paying 3 million each. Some of these other values that we didn't talk about are going to be used in the different parts of this calculation, but what we can see is on a 280 stack, you're going to need an average of 6.9 attempts. 5.9 of these will fail, 1 of them will succeed on average. So if you have a 60% chance, oops, I put that number in wrong, it should be 0.4. If you have a 60% chance to downgrade when you fail, that means you'll fail about 2.4 times on average, making a pen accessory. From that, we can then calculate the difference of the Tri-Debo and the Tet-Debo to get how much each one of those downgrades actually costs you, and then do all the math to figure out what it normally costs to make a Debo. So our production cost with no hammer when we're using vendor crons is just under 500 million silver. It's 496, 509 million, and that's including everything that we need, both the Deborahs that we're going to downgrade, the base Debos that we're going to use, the cron stones, assuming we're buying them off the vendor. So that is a really important number to have, because that is going to allow us to calculate what the hammer is actually worth. And to do that, we need to figure out how much it would cost to make this accessory normally. So what we have here is the cost when we use the hammer. When we use the hammer, we don't have any downgrades, right? The downgrades go away. So we have just the value of our Tet Deboreka here, because we do need a Tet Deboreka that's going to become the pen. We have our base Deberekas times the number of attempts that we're going to do, which is 6.9. And then we have the value of the hammers. We will need 6.9 hammers on average to get it. So we have to multiply that by that. And then we have the value of our fail stack here. So the math on this one is actually much simpler, since we don't need to worry about the downgrades. But what you can see is that the cost to make a Deboreka with the hammer, assuming 85 billion silver for the Tet and 825 million for the base and 27 billion for the hammer, is 291.89 million. So basically we'll say 290 billion, 92 billion to make a pen Debo with a hammer. So obviously that's a massive, massive savings versus using vendor crons. That's super huge. And so what we can do then is we can take this value and put it in for this pen Debo value right here. And what that's going to do is that is going to determine if this is our production cost with the hammer, how much value is the hammer actually getting out if we solve then for the value of the hammer. So that's what I'm going to do. We have 496.5, or sorry, no, 0.509 right there. And that gives us, here we can, we don't need all those significant digits. We'll scroll that over. 56.6 billion silver per hammer. So that is pretty great. The hammer caps out at 50 billion silver. So this means in a world where your only options are either make the Debo with vendor crons or make it with a hammer, the hammer is worth buying even at its absolute max price, assuming that the Debos are worth 85 bill. If we drop the price of the Debos, you can see that it does change the number a bit, but not that much, because we're not failing oh wait, sorry, that's not actually putting the numbers in. So here, let's see, if we drop them to 65 billion, then it becomes 429. So if we put in 429, we can see that 65 billion silver, if the Tets are selling for 65 billion silver, that's about where we break even with the max price of the hammer. So 65 bill is kind of your number to look out for, where now it's not really worth buying a max price hammer. Of course, there's other benefits to using the hammer as well, such as not needing to remake the Tets and things like that, which saves you some time. That's sort of baked into my value of the Tet here, because we're assuming a market value of the Tet. It could be a little bit different if we're valuing these Tets less, because we're assuming that you're making them yourself or something like that. So, you can play with this in your own personal use in terms of what that TET value is, but 65 billion, if you're valuing the TET about that, is sort of where we get our breakpoint for the max price hammer. But that means these things are really good to use for debos if you're using vendor crons. Now, let's go back to 85 bill for our TETs and let's look at if we are using costume crons. So when we say costume crons, we're talking about a situation where we purchase costumes off the market and we've broken them down for cron stones. When you do that, the math works out so that it's about 1.65 million silver per cron stone, and you can see that that has a massive impact on the cost of producing a pen Deboreka. We're now down to about 389 billion to produce the debo. So if we go ahead and we put that new number into our spreadsheet, we can see that now the hammer is only valued at about 41 billion silver. Still significantly more than the current price on the market, which is they're tanking down to 27 billion for sure, which is the min price. Now, who knows how long they'll actually sit down at 27 billion. There's a ton of them that all got dumped into the game all at once. And, once those have been consumed, there probably aren't going to be tons of new ones flooding the game constantly. So, we'll see what happens. But they might also start giving them away during things like the Calpheon Ball and the Heidel Ball and that kind of stuff, like they do with the other armor and weapon hammers. But moral of the story, 41 billion silver if you're using vendor crons, which means most of the time you're still going to want to use the hammer over vendor crons. Pretty much if you're using a pen debo, you're probably going to want to use the hammers, which makes sense. That's why they were added to the game. So good numbers there all around. Now we have some more interesting questions, which are what kind of stuff is this going to do to the pen debo market? And do we think pen debos are ever actually going to sit on the market? And the way we can sort of figure this out is we need to know a few things. For one, if it's going to be economical for someone to sell a pen debo, then the pen debo production costs needs to be below what they actually get when they sell it. Of course, some people will gamble and sell the ones that they gamble anyway, but we're talking about people who are intentionally making it to sell to make profit. So if we consider that the max price of a debo is 300 billion silver, if I put this in the calculator real quick, let's just assume so it's someone like me, someone with a merchant ring who's going to get the most possible value out of their Deboreka. It's going to only give me about 266 billion when I sell a debo. And so what that means is I need to be able to make a debo for less than 266 billion, realistically significantly less than 266 billion, because I'm not going to make it if the profit margin is zero. So what would the TETs actually need to sell for before this production cost here gets to 266 billion, assuming we're talking about 27 billion value on the hammer? That's min priced hammers. So if we look at the TETs here, we can start plugging them in. Let's just guess and check some numbers here. Well, we kind of got it on the first guess. 55 billion. If the TETs sit at about 55 billion, the production cost, again, assuming you're valuing the fail stack at about 15 billion, assuming you're using a 280 stack, assuming you're valuing the debos at the actual base max price base value, which is again probably not completely fair, about 261 or 62 billion to produce a pen if the TETs are 55 bill each. What that means is we probably won't see pen debos sit on the market anytime soon, because even still the margins on this are pretty small. So, and it's a significant risk you're taking when you start making an item that costs, 260 billion silver to produce. So yeah, I mean, that's more or less what we're looking at. I wouldn't count on pens sitting anytime soon. If we look at the current market price, it's not that much cheaper to make one with a hammer than it is to just buy a pen if you can get a pen for 300 bill. So I actually went ahead and put a pre-order up for a pen Deboreka earring at the moment. I might take that down. I'm not 100% sure. One did sell today. Based on these numbers here, it is a little bit cheaper to produce it myself, but it's not a huge savings versus just buying it for 300 off the market. And it does save a lot of headaches, saves a lot of time making super big stacks and that kind of thing. So we are entering into an interesting world where especially people who take their hammer and gamble on a pen pen debo and get it might start selling them. You might start seeing them hit the market more frequently, and the math isn't like completely insane for making one versus, you know, buying it off the market. They're relatively close actually, as long as the hammers are actually 27 billion silver. Editor Biohack here. There's one more thing I think I should add, which is the 55 billion silver value is what the player values the Deborek at, not necessarily what the market values it at. And that's important because there are people who currently grind Debo in order to make Tets to sell for profit. That is probably the best money you can make grinding in the game right now. And so what that means is it doesn't necessarily have to hit 55 billion on the market before a player might be willing to make pen and sell it. In fact, if the Tets drop all the way down to 65 billion silver on the market, a individual person who's grinding Debos to make them to sell might start to consider tapping it to pen and selling it at pen instead of selling the Tets. So even if they're only at 65 bill on the market, or if they're still 65 bill on the market, not all the way down to 55, you could start to see more pens hit the market from people who are grinding everything and tapping them all the way up to pen. That's sort of the break-even point for where it becomes worth it to tap it to pen. Especially, you might see people at least do one attempt with the hammer they got for free, because they would incur an additional tax if they sold that hammer. So now we're looking at even more incentive to grind a Tet, tap it to pen with the hammer, and then if it fails, you can decide whether you want to buy more hammers and try and get another pen, or try and, you know, do another attempt at pen, or just sell it directly. So keep that in mind as well. 65 bill could also be a market benchmark where we start to see more pens getting sold as well. Okay, so what are the conclusions from the analysis that we've done in this video? The first thing that we determined is that a hammer is worth about 57 billion silver when you compare it to using vendor crons to make a pen. That was assuming the Tets are worth about 85 billion, bases are 825, we're using a 280 stack, and we're valuing that stack at about 15 billion silver. That is much higher than the cap that the hammers actually go up to. So this means if your options are make a pen debo with vendor crons or use the hammer, you're pretty much always going to use the hammer, even if they are at their absolute cap in price. If you start to use costume crons, those are crons that you acquire by buying a costume off the market and melting it into cron stones, a hammer starts to be worth only about 41 billion silver. So if they're sitting at max price at 50 bill, you might not actually want to do that. You might just want to use the costume crons to make the pen instead. But it's still significantly more than their current price on the market, which is quickly crashing down to the minimum 27 bill. If we're talking about buying a pen debo or making it yourself with these hammers, it's pretty close when they're at their minimum of 27. It's a little bit cheaper when they're at 27. About 28 billion silver is what we would have to value the hammer at before it would be about even buying a pen debo for 300 or making it yourself under those conditions. If we compare it to buying a pen debo, I actually didn't talk about this in the video, but if we compare it to basically making a pen debo and selling it, it's never really worth it. At the current price of Tets for 85 billion, the hammers would have to be all the way down at 23 billion, which they're never going to go to. So it's not worth buying these up to make pens at the current price of Tets. Tets would have to fall significantly before selling pen would actually be worth it. When we look at the math on what that number would have to be, if we're talking about making Tet debos, buying the Tets off the market and tapping them to pen and selling them, even if the hammers are min price at 27 bill, the Tets would have to be worth only about 55 billion silver, and you would need a merchant ring and a very efficient enhancing strategy before that might be something that you would actually consider doing. Of course, people who make their own Tets to sell them for profit would incur the sales tax if they sold them at Tet. So realistically, if we see Tets hit about 65 billion silver on the market, it starts to become an interesting decision for people who are making Tets to sell, whether they want to start going and tapping for pen or not. I could see a lot of people who grind Tet debos at least doing one attempt with the hammer they got from the login reward to see if they could get a pen and sell it that way. once the tets are about 65 bill. If they're higher than 65 bill, you're better off just selling the tets. So it's hard to say whether we will eventually see pen debos sit on the market. It's possible. Tet debos have been crashing pretty heavily for a while now, but this is going to generate more demand as people buy the tets to try and make their own pens with the hammers that they got. So it's a little hard to say what's going to happen in the long run, but this can give you a baseline to keep an eye out for when you might start seeing pen debos sit. Of course, we would also need to get access to bases in order for that to happen, but they're much more grindable than they have been in the past. So yeah, that's pretty much the findings of this video. If you found this helpful, please subscribe to the channel, give me a like, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.